the day we got the certificate. My fiancé, Jacob, actually said he wanted to split the costs with me, $4.50 each. Actually, $9 is nothing to me. But this cold calculation is like a knife. It suddenly shattered my expectations of marriage. I looked at him, feeling a complex mix of emotions inside. This marriage, I suddenly didn't want to go through with it. My fiancé, Jacob, and I had agreed to meet at the Civil Affairs Bureau at 9 this morning. We planned to get our marriage certificate first. We would discuss the other things later. That day, I dressed up on purpose. I picked out a nice outfit, just to take the best picture for the marriage certificate. I waited from 8:30 until 10. Jacob still hadn't arrived. Sweat was dripping down my forehead. I really couldn't wait any longer. I had no choice but to walk into the Civil Affairs Bureau alone. Inside, couples were whispering and laughing softly. Everyone had a smile of happiness on their faces. I stood alone at the door. I stood out particularly. A staff member came over and asked me if I was there to get a divorce. I was momentarily stunned. I didn't expect that in others' eyes. I actually seemed like someone about to end a marriage. I forced a wry smile. I shook my head. I hurriedly escaped from that uncomfortable place. Just as I reached the door, I saw Jacob coming leisurely. I was suddenly furious. I shouted at him. "Where have you been?" I almost yelled it out. "Why couldn't I reach you by phone?" He frowned. His expression was cold. "Now you know what it feels like to be stood up, right?" His voice was as cold as ice. It made my heart tighten. I was momentarily frozen. I desperately tried to recall when I had disappointed him. Suddenly, I remembered something from a week ago. That day, we had originally planned to go to the newly opened seafood buffet for dinner, but just before the end of the workday, the boss suddenly gave me an urgent task. There was no way around it. I had to call Jacob, to tell him I had to work overtime, and to ask him to wait for me for a while. If he got hungry, he could eat first. He replied angrily, "Why didn't you tell me in advance that you had to work overtime? Forget it. You don't need to come anymore. Emily is with me. We're going to eat. Just transfer the money to me." I hadn't even had a chance to ask Emily why she was with him. He hung up the phone. At 8:30 p.m., I finally finished my work. When I rushed to the restaurant, I only saw empty seats. Later, Emily told me that she didn't have dinner with Jacob. She even sent me a photo of herself at home. As for Jacob, he probably didn't eat either, but he took the money. Yet he didn't wait for me. The next few days, Jacob didn't answer my calls. Until last night, he finally informed me to go pick up the marriage certificate today. Looking at him, I felt incredibly exhausted. I even considered giving up on marriage, but thinking of our 3 years of relationship, I ultimately couldn't bring myself to do it. So I followed him into the Civil Affairs Bureau. He turned to look at me, with a smug smile on his face. "Next time you stand me up, I might just deal with you the same way." I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself down. Now neither of us owes anything to each other. Let's go. To pick up the marriage certificate. When taking the photo, Jacob was calm as usual, as if the indifferent person from just now was just my mistake. But when I received the photo, I couldn't feel happy at all. The me in the photo, it looks a bit forced. The expression is stiff. It seems like he hasn't recovered from the earlier chill. The person taking the photo said, "Handsome guys and beautiful girls really match well. It's a total of 20. How do we pay?" The girl taking the photo smiled and took out the payment code. Jacob glanced at me. He paid with his phone. We walked out of the store. He handed the payment code in front of me. "I just paid 20. You just need to transfer me 10. I nodded gently. I transferred the money over, but inside it felt like being pricked by a needle. The staff handed over an application form. I looked up at Jacob. He was lowering his head, concentrating on writing his name. At that moment, I suddenly felt he was so unfamiliar, as if he were someone I had never truly known. Recalling the bits and pieces of our acquaintance, those once beautiful moments now felt so distant. When Jacob was chasing me, every morning, hot breakfast is delivered on time. When I had a cold, he would brave the heavy rain to bring me medicine. After we got together, he was especially kind to me. He listens to everything I say. He, at that time, was like the sunshine in my life. But since when did everything become different? Was it because I wanted to refuse him moving in with me? Or was it when my dad had a heart attack and urgently needed money? His indifference and selfishness left me heartbroken. I remember at that time, I frantically called Jacob, begging him to lend me $30,000 for emergencies. However, his response was like a bucket of cold water extinguishing all my hopes. I had given all my money to my mom, Now I only had 1,000 yuan left. Do you want it? At that moment, I felt like my heart was shattered. Later, a friend told me, Jacob is actually mocking me behind my back for borrowing money from him. He said, last time her dad was sick, she actually asked me to borrow money, you said. Can I lend her this money? 30,000 yuan isn't too much. But it's still money I earned through hard work and late nights, not to mention when she will pay me back. While we discuss our wedding plans, she might say we're family now, so this money doesn't need to be paid back. My friend was stunned. Are you not afraid that she will find out later and break up with you? Jacob replied casually. Don't worry, I've already told her. The money is kept by my mom for when we buy a house and get married. I was both angry and anxious at that moment. I really wanted to rush up and ask him what was going on, but then I thought about it. I seem to have no reason to be angry if others are willing to lend money. It's a matter of feeling. If Jacob doesn't lend, that's also his responsibility. Why should I let such a trivial matter hurt our relationship? So, I pretended that nothing happened. I turned around and walked back to my original position. I acted as if I didn't hear anything, but thinking back now, that incident may have been weighing on my heart all along. I actually never truly let it go. What are you thinking about? Hurry up and fill out the form. Jacob suddenly pushed me. It interrupted my thoughts. I was startled. I looked up at him and found him looking quite impatient. There were also staff members waiting nearby. I quickly looked down. I glanced at the form. I filled in my name and ID number, then handed it to the staff member. The staff member smiled as they took it, then said, by the way, we still need to check your genes. Ma'am, please follow me. I followed the staff member into the room. It was just a simple blood draw. The sister, who was just smiling at me, suddenly asked, have you really decided to get married? I was taken aback for a moment. Then I nodded. She continued to say, marriage is a major event in life. You must think it through. Only then can you decide whether to become a couple. I just observed how you two were together. I always felt that you didn't seem like a real couple. I was momentarily speechless. I didn't know how to explain. Jacob and I are indeed a couple. It's just that we were in a Cold War for several days before getting the certificate. When I came out, Jacob was happily looking at his phone with his head down. I walked over and quietly asked him, who are you chatting with? You're smiling so happily. He saw me sitting next to him. He deliberately brought the phone in front of me and said, look, Emily is wearing this kind of outfit. She really thinks of herself as a guy. So funny. In the photo, Emily is wearing a cool black jacket. Inside, there was a simple black tank top. It revealed her beautiful collarbones and faint abs. Her slim waist was enviable. I hadn't said anything yet. Jacob stood up and followed that sister into the room. I stood there. I thought of Emily. Although I knew nothing would happen between her and Jacob, but I still felt uneasy inside. Emily and Jacob grew up together. She often hovered around him. But I knew they wouldn't have that kind of relationship. Emily is good-looking. She has always thought about marrying a rich man. Jacob has no house, no car. How could he possibly attract her attention? This is not a wild guess on my part. It's what Emily herself told me. She told me, as a friend, Jacob is fine. But if it comes to marriage, she suggested I think it over carefully. I didn't expect to hear such words from her. After all, they have known each other for over 20 years. Both emotionally and logically speaking. Jacob's good friends shouldn't come between us. In the past, I always thought Emily was just trying to get Jacob's attention because it felt uncomfortable seeing he had a girlfriend. Or maybe she's just one of those annoying green teas. But after getting to know her, I completely changed my mind. After Jacob introduced me to Emily, she always reaches out to me first when she needs something. Like when she needs to change a light bulb, she would ask me first. Then she'd call Jacob to help. I always go with Jacob, but there was one time I didn't go. That day, Jacob and I were watching a movie at the cinema. Emily texted me saying she had a high fever that wouldn't go down and wanted me to take her to the hospital, but I didn't bring my phone when I went to the bathroom. When I came back, Jacob had already left. He had put my phone on the seat next to a girl. After I saw the message, she even blamed me for telling Jacob. I feel Jacob might have a crush on her, but Emily has no feelings for him. When I arrived at the hospital, Jacob was about to feed Emily some porridge, but Emily didn't accept it. As soon as I got there, Jacob awkwardly touched his nose and said to me, "Why did you come now? Emily is about to collapse." Luckily, I arrived early. Emily clearly notified me to come first. "How did you get here first?" I asked. Jacob seemed a bit nervous. He replied that he hadn't paid yet, and then quickly slipped away, in the ward. Emily looked at me and said, "Are you still not planning to break up? He's really not a suitable partner for marriage." I sighed. In my heart, I actually wanted to break up already. A man who usually splits the bill with me for meals. Yet he unhesitatingly paid the hospitalization fee for another woman. He might be a good friend, but definitely not someone I can entrust my life to. Emily's words. I've always kept it in my heart. That day, I thought about it for a long time. In the end, I decided to break up with him, but he thought I was joking. He turned around and went to find my mom. He said I was messing around with a breakup. My mom doesn't understand Jacob's true character. Every time he came to my house, he behaved very well, so my parents really liked him. But the gifts Jacob brought to my house were actually bought by me. When I went to his house, the things he bought were also brought by me. However, what he bought each time was quite simple, just some fruits. This made his mom a bit dissatisfied with me. Later, I bought his mom a gold necklace, but Jacob said, "This is your gift to my mom. Don't think about me reimbursing you." So my mom doesn't support my breakup. She thinks Jacob is quite a good kid. She even urges us to get married soon. Because my dad's health isn't very good, Mom hopes he can hold his grandson soon. Every time I decide to break up, it's always my mom who advises me. I want to get married soon. I don't want my dad to have regrets, so I have chosen to compromise time and again. I really envy Emily. Not only is she beautiful, but she also knows clearly what she wants and what she doesn't want. At this moment, the doctor interrupted my thoughts. He told me the genetic test results were out. Neither of us has any issues. While waiting in line to get the marriage certificate, I suddenly thought, would Jacob be willing to pay the bride price for me? I couldn't help but ask him, "Jacob, after we get the certificate, how much bride price do you plan to give me?" Actually, I don't really want that money. I just want to know if he is willing to make sacrifices for me. Jacob listened, furrowed his brows, and asked with some confusion, "Your mom said not to ask for a betrothal gift. Didn't she'll even give you some private savings as a dowry? Go on." He changed the subject. "By the way, how much private savings do you have? How about we pool our money to buy a car?" I looked at the calculating look in his eyes. I was momentarily stunned. I didn't expect he not only didn't want to give a betrothal gift, but he even had his eyes on my private savings. My family did prepare a dowry of $200,000. This money was originally planned for renovating our new house after marriage. But the specific amount, I have never mentioned to Jacob. I explained. My mom didn't say there wouldn't be a betrothal gift. What she meant was for you to first give a betrothal gift of $66,000. When the wedding is held, this money will be returned to you as part of the gift. That's impossible. Jacob got anxious. He lowered his voice and said firmly, "Your mom clearly said before that there shouldn't be a betrothal gift, and my family doesn't have any money right now. You know this very well." He might think his earlier words were a bit too much. The voices gradually lowered. I quietly watched him. Suddenly, I felt particularly calm inside. "Jacob, you think we still need to get the marriage certificate?" I asked him softly. He seemed to sense my emotional change. He quickly comforted me. "Of course we need to get it. Don't worry, babe. The bride price is negotiable. I'll go home and get my salary card from my mom. I've been working for a while now. Anything that should be given to you will be given. We'll get the marriage certificate today. Tomorrow, I'll go back and tell my mom about this." He assured me firmly. I listened quietly, did not respond. At this moment, the couple in front of us had already completed the formalities. It was our turn. Jacob excitedly pulled me along. We walked up to the window and sat down. We submitted our materials. The staff calmly told us, "The service fee is 9 yuan. Jacob quickly took out 9 yuan. His movements were decisive. The staff accepted the money and casually took our documents. I felt a bit hopeful. I thought Jacob wouldn't make me share the cost this time. After he got the change of 1 yuan, he whispered to me, "The certificate costs 9 yuan. Let's split it. You give me 5 yuan. That way the cost of our documents is shared." "How interesting," he said with a smile. It seemed like such a romantic thing. I looked at him in surprise. I didn't expect him to still be quibbling over a few dimes at this point. What was even more outrageous was, he wanted to earn an extra 50 cents from me. I really couldn't imagine what it would be like to live with someone like him in the future. At that moment, the staff returned our documents to us and handed me a marriage confirmation letter to sign. I didn't sign. She directly picked up the documents and turned to leave. Jacob asked from behind, "Baby, where are you going?" Look, I didn't stop. He seemed a bit anxious. He shouted loudly, "Lily, come back quickly." Jacob was calling me from behind. The voice gradually faded. I made up my mind. I can't go back. Maybe I have set my expectations too high for him. Perhaps we haven't officially married yet. It's indeed not appropriate for me to spend his money. But right now, we are here to handle the marriage procedures. He can usually go Dutch with me, but it really shouldn't be like this at this moment. I got into the taxi. I felt extremely upset inside. I kept thinking, what if we have our own home in the future? Will we still have to pay separately? What if we have children? I can't go out to work. I would have to rely on him to support the family. What should I do then? I know, these thoughts might be a bit premature. My mom has told me since I was little, girls should never ask for things at any time, even if I have a boyfriend in the future. If he gives me a gift, I should also give him one in return when we go out to eat together. This time he pays the bill. Next time it will definitely be my turn to pay. After all, a guy's money doesn't come from nowhere. I always remember the lessons my mom taught me, but Jacob seems to not quite understand this reciprocal approach. On Valentine's Day, he mysteriously asked me out. Then he took out a scarf. He said he secretly knitted it for half a month. The scarf was very well made. Complex locking stitches were tightly woven. I looked at the scarf I had knitted after a month of learning. I suddenly felt a bit embarrassed to take it out. But then I thought, this is, after all, my heartfelt intention, even though it's not as good as his. I also put in a lot of effort. I was just about to take out the scarf. He suddenly pushed a magnified image of a keyboard in front of me. He said with a smile, "You are so busy with work. You must not have time to prepare a gift for me. I've had my eye on this keyboard for a long time. I'll send you the link. You don't need to look for it anymore." I was pondering. He gave me a scarf. It makes sense for me to give him a keyboard in return. However, that keyboard costs over $2,000. That's about half a month's salary for me. After dinner, I returned home. I took out the scarf and looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. As I was looking, I suddenly noticed a small price tag on one corner of the scarf. 299 yuan. I don't know if he didn't see the price tag, or if he thought the scarf didn't have a price tag at all. In any case, he bought a scarf, but he lied to me, saying he knitted it himself. He even took the opportunity to take credit. He exchanged the scarf for the keyboard he liked. Moreover, this isn't the first time such a thing has happened. I once asked him why he did this. He said it apologetically. It was to save money for a wedding house. I was quite happy at that time. Looking back now, he just wanted to use me. When I got out of the taxi, I wiped the tears off my face. My parents are not in good health. I can't let them see that I've been crying. During the time in the car, Jacob and his mother kept calling me. I didn't want to answer, because I already knew what they would say. I stood at the door of my house, my hand on the doorknob, but I hesitated to push it open. My heart was in turmoil. I didn't know how to explain it clearly to my parents. We originally agreed to go get the marriage certificate today, but it turned into an unpleasant situation. I can't carry all this grievance and hastily decide my whole life. I forced myself to endure the discomfort in my heart and pushed open the door to my home. Mom and Dad prepared a lavish spread of food. It seems they were waiting for Jacob and me to come back after getting our marriage certificate to celebrate together. I noticed there was no one behind me. They were momentarily stunned. Mom asked in confusion, "Where did Jacob go? Didn't we agree to come home for dinner after getting the certificate?" At that moment, I could no longer control myself. The psychological defenses I had maintained outside completely collapsed when I saw my parents. I hadn't even had the chance to speak, and tears started streaming down uncontrollably when my parents saw me like this. They immediately came over to comfort me, but I just cried harder. After a while, I slowly calmed down. With a choked voice, I said, "Mom and Dad, I've decided not to marry Jacob." As soon as I said that, my parents were both stunned. Mom asked, "What happened? Didn't you two have a good relationship all along?" Mom continued to speak. "Jacob is quite filial. Your dad was hospitalized before. He even took the initiative to pay 30,000 yuan. Dear, don't break up with him over a small matter," Mom advised me. I was stunned. Last time, the money for Dad's hospitalization was clearly borrowed from a friend by me. How could Mom think it was Jacob who paid? Mom noticed my confusion. She explained, "When your dad was discharged from the hospital, didn't you leave early because of work at the company? Jacob went to settle the bill. He came to pick up your dad when he was discharged. He even said we don't need to pay this money back. Consider it a gesture from a future son-in-law." I was completely taken aback. I never expected things would turn out like this. Jacob's actions were even more excessive than I imagined. At that time, to avoid worrying Dad, I hadn't mentioned anything about borrowing money to them. I didn't expect that. Jacob directly refused when I asked him to pick Dad up from the hospital. But then he ran to Mom to take credit. He really knows how to act. That's him deceiving you. The 30,000 yuan was something I had to borrow from friends. I initially asked him for the money, but he refused me. Since I've decided to break up with Jacob, I no longer need to hide it from my parents. I told my parents everything, including when we went to each other's parents' houses. The gifts were all chosen by ourselves, along with what his friends said, and we each paid half for the marriage certificate. Each paid 45 yuan. After hearing this, my parents were stunned. They never expected it. The seemingly perfect Jacob was actually this kind of person privately. Dad said, "Child, if you don't want to get married, then don't. Dad will support you for life. We don't marry someone like that." From the moment I stepped into the house, Dad hasn't said a word, but when he finally spoke, I couldn't hold back anymore. My tears flowed down all at once. He said, "You child, why didn't you tell your parents earlier? If I had known he was that kind of person, I would never have let him through our door." Mom regrets it deeply. She once hoped I would marry and have kids early. Fortunately, there's still a chance to make amends. Dad wants you to get married. He hopes you can find someone to rely on for a lifetime. However, he's clearly not that person. In the future, you need to choose wisely. Don't put all of your parents' expectations on yourself. Even though Dad is getting older, he still wants to be your support. You can always hide behind him. This sentence, others might not fully understand its meaning, but I do. I will always be Dad's treasure. The doorbell rang. I guess it's Jacob. I quickly held back my mom, who was about to get up. Mom gently patted my hand. She gave me a reassuring look. She asked, "Auntie, has Lily come back? You need to talk some sense into her." We had all agreed to get the certificate. We were just one signature away. But then she suddenly ran away. I really don't understand what she's thinking. Jacob still doesn't know where he went wrong. Instead, he went to complain to my mom about me. He completely didn't notice my mom's bad mood. He just wanted to go inside, but he was stopped by my mom at the door. He said unhappily, "Auntie, what's going on here? We're all family now. Why can't I come in? I was just about to have a good talk with Lily." My mom finally couldn't hold back. She said coldly, "Our Lily has nothing to say to you. Just go. Our family will not welcome you anymore. We will not become one family with you, Auntie." "What do you mean by that?" "Let Lily come out. You should leave quickly. Lily doesn't want to see you right now." Maybe my mom has never spoken to him in that tone before. Jacob calmed down a bit. "Auntie, is something wrong?" Lily rushed back so suddenly. Did something happen with Uncle? His sudden question made me very angry. My dad finally couldn't hold back. He clenched his fists and was about to rush out to teach someone a lesson. I saw that the situation was off. I quickly stepped forward to stop him. "If you can't speak properly, then don't say anything. Mom, you and Dad wait for me at home. I'll be back soon. Some things need to be clarified in person." Without waiting for my mom to speak, I pulled Jacob and walked out. I shut the door behind me. On the way, I have been silent all along. Jacob kept asking me why I wanted to leave. I stopped in my tracks. I calmly told him, "I have decided not to get married. I have changed my mind." Jacob looked at me in surprise. His face was filled with disbelief. "Why suddenly not get married? I have already discussed it with my family. We were supposed to get the marriage certificate today. You're not going to get it now. How am I supposed to explain this to my family? You're not a child anymore. Some things shouldn't be joked about." Looking at him now, I can't help but find it a bit amusing. How could I have been fooled by him back then? Then there's no need to explain. It's precisely because I'm no longer a child. That's why I can see through your true colors earlier. You even want me to share the cost of the marriage certificate. How can I trust that you can provide me with a good life in the future? Jacob finally realized that I was serious. This isn't a joke. He always likes to argue about right and wrong. Now his face showed an anxious expression. He quickly reached out to try to grab me, but I dodged. He was momentarily stunned. He seemed a bit awkward. "If you're unhappy because I made you pay for the marriage certificate, then I can pay for it myself. Don't be angry, okay?" He does understand where the problem lies. It's just that he doesn't fully grasp it. I looked at him. I felt particularly calm inside. Now he can no longer stir any emotions in me. I can pay this 9 yuan too. But is the problem really just this 9 yuan? You even want to split the cost of the marriage certificate with me. Then how can I rely on you in the future? Don't worry, I'm just used to saving. My parents worked hard to raise me. I have to save a bit. Give me another chance. I promise I won't do this again. It's just the same old cliches, talking about how his parents raised him with difficulty. Did it only become difficult after getting to know me? I remember back in school, he was wearing the latest sneakers. When we were together back then, there were even jokes that Jacob's family must be quite wealthy. She met a well-off boy at school, thinking about living a leisurely life in the future. But when I went to his house, I realized that his school reputation relied entirely on his family's support. Although his mother wasn't wealthy, she still did her best to meet his needs. I would rather take on extra jobs to satisfy his vanity. Later, I learned about his family situation. I advised him a few times. Only then did he slightly understand his parents' hardships. Now he uses his parents' struggles to argue against me. Is he trying to shift his guilt onto me? Perhaps hearing me ask that, Jacob quickly clarified that wasn't his intention. Jacob quickly clarified that he didn't mean it that way. But anyway, this cannot be his excuse. Jacob, have you considered our marriage and having children? If I can't work, I'll have to ask you for money to buy formula. You would find me annoying and say I don't know how to manage life. All day just asking you for money. I can still imagine when I am lying on the hospital bed giving birth. The way you wait outside the door. Other mothers' husbands are pained by their wives' cries, and you might be outside the door, shouting my name loudly, eagerly asking me for my bank card password. Seeing Jacob's dazed expression, I just feel he could definitely do those things. I still remember one time, I asked him to buy a bottle of soy sauce, but he insisted that I give him the money first. And another time we had a fight, just because I didn't apologize. He just left me with the elderly and the kids, and was gone for a whole month, even longer. He wouldn't come back until I apologized. However, I didn't expect that at all. Jacob said softly, "You can save enough money for having a child before considering having one." I really don't know how to describe my feelings at that time. Jacob immediately explained, "That's not what I meant. Look, when we get married, we need to have a house, right? At that time, my salary will go towards paying the mortgage. Your salary can cover the daily expenses, and we can save some money to prepare for having children in the future. Isn't that just a normal family life?" I heard him say that. Although I had a feeling, I still couldn't help but ask, "Will my name be on the property certificate?" Jacob suddenly fell silent. I had already guessed it would be like this. We are not children from wealthy families. We have to work really hard to have a stable place to live. Jacob is particularly good at budgeting. How could he casually add my name to the property certificate? He had already planned all of this. His entire salary goes towards paying the mortgage. My income is only enough for the household's daily expenses. In this way, even if we separate in the future, he can still securely keep a house, and I might end up with nothing. Jacob eagerly said to me, "Lily, if we get married, I will definitely treat you well. How could we possibly get a divorce? Once married, we are family. It doesn't matter whose name is on the house. There's no need to worry about these things." He tried to ease my coldness with a light tone. "Let's just break up," I calmly said and turned to leave. I didn't want to hear any more of his explanations. Jacob caught up and grabbed my arm. "No, you can't just say we're breaking up and that's it. I don't agree. If you decide to break up, then you need to pay me back for the money I've spent." After saying that, he took out his phone, opened the Notes app, opened the memo. It details our expenses together. "These are all the expenses we incurred together. I remember it clearly," he said with a tone of pride. He said, "If you want to break up, that's fine, but first, pay me back the money." His eyes were filled with greed. It seems like I owe him more than just money. There are also the times we spent together. I looked at him. My heart was filled with disappointment. I didn't expect him to remember everything I gave him so clearly. Ironically, the bill shows in 3 years he spent less than $10,000 on me. "Fine, then you should return everything I gave you," I replied coldly. 5 pairs of shoes cost $7,000. The keyboard was over $2,000. The trench coat was over $5,000. The computer was over $9,000. And the $10,000 I gave you to exchange for a fridge. That $10,000 was given to me by you. It cannot be counted as a loan," he argued. "No way. I have records of all these large expenses. I clearly told you, if you don't pay me back, I will sue you in court. I will expose everything about you." Jacob sees that I am resolute. "I'm a bit anxious," he said. "Lily, don't misunderstand. I actually don't want to break up. Let's not be awkward anymore." "Okay," he spoke with a pleading tone. At that moment, I felt a wave of oppression in my heart, although it wasn't severe pain. I just felt a dull ache in my heart. I took a deep breath. I said to him, Pay me back the money within 3 days. From now on, we'll go our separate ways. If you still don't pay back, we'll meet in court, back at home. I saw my parents' eyes were a bit red. I felt particularly uncomfortable inside. There is nothing that parents cannot forgive, and no one can remain blind to the truth forever. Although I am in a lot of pain right now, but stopping the losses in time is better than continuing to suffer. The pain will eventually pass. The sun will still rise tomorrow. I will still face life with a smile. The future. I might get married and have children. I will also have my own happiness. But in my future days, there will no longer be the presence of Jacob.